in part, as you say, why more Republican senators are calling for an independent and transparent investigation into the deadly shooting of Alex Preddy. At least 10 have posted statements about Saturday's shooting, including John Curtis of Utah, who criticized DHS Secretary Kristi Noem, calling her response to Preddy's death premature, adding, "It came before all the facts were known and weakened confidence." Others speaking out include senators from states that voted overwhelmingly for President Trump. Mike Crapo of Idaho wrote in part, "Preddy's family, law-abiding citizens exercising their Second Amendment right, and the trust of the American people deserve a fair process." Jerry Moran of Kansas posted, "Law enforcement must reflect our nation's values, and citizens should obey the law. This tragic circumstance should be investigated to the fullest extent to ensure transparency and accountability." Pete Ricketts of Nebraska reiterated his support for ICE, but also wrote, "We must also maintain our core values as a nation, including the right to protest and assemble." And Ted Cruz of Texas said the administration is taking the wrong tone in the aftermath of the shootings in Minnesota.
That immediately when an incident like this happens, they come out guns blazing, that we took out a violent terrorist, hooray. And the problem is, particularly for someone not paying attention, if you're being told this is a mom of three and there's no indication, she's not waving an ISIS flag or doesn't have a suicide vest around her.
Yeah.
Escalating the rhetoric doesn't help, and it actually loses credibility. And so I would encourage the administration to be more measured, to recognize the tragedy and to say we don't want anyone's lives to be lost. And the politicians who are pouring gasoline onto this fire, they need to stop.
So more Republican reaction. Republican governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, is also calling on the Trump administration to rethink the ongoing ICE operations in Minnesota following the fatal shooting death of Alex Preddy. During a recent interview on the Mark Davis Show, Abbott noted the White House was already facing public backlash over the killing of Renee Good and said the enforcement operations need to be recalibrated.
In general, we need to have respect for law enforcement officers in the country. ICE, they are law enforcement officers. And so they, being the White House, need to recalibrate on what needs to be done to make sure that that respect is going to be reinstilled. And that's not an easy task, especially under the current circumstances. But I know that they're working on a game plan to make sure that they are going to, let's say, recalibrate and maybe work from a different direction to ensure that they get back to what they wanted to do to begin with. And that is to remove people from the country who are here illegally.
There's also Fox News host Sean Hannity, who on his radio show yesterday did slam Democratic immigration policies, but also criticized the ICE raids as establishments, especially ICE raids at establishments like Home Depot.
Now, is ICE perfect? They're not. Can they do a better job? They can. Do I think that, some of the optics at times, do I think that going into Home Depots and arresting people there is a good idea? I don't. I don't think the people that if you're working at a place, you're not the immediate problem. Eventually, we'll have to deal with those people that didn't respect our laws, borders, and sovereignty. There's got to be a program where people get to come forward. I think they should then be given transportation home. They can get a check for $2,000, and they can apply to come back in the country legally. We can vet them. We can do a health check on them and make sure they won't be a financial burden on the American people. I think that'd be a more responsible, reasonable way to deal with that problem.
Wow. So the Republican reaction really playing a huge role here, I think, in what played out, Joe.
Right.
And it's not just the ICE raids across the country where you see ICE agents bashing their way into cars, pushing their way into homes, making mistakes,
right,
detaining U.S. citizens, detaining children. But these two killings were jarring. U.S. citizens.
Americans.
And then the lies that followed were so fast and so furious that I think it was chilling universally.
Right. And I am struck
by Sean Hannity's words, the senator's words, and struck because that position has been what I've been saying all along, what I've been saying since 1994. And I'm struck that the administration didn't start here. And I'm struck because, again, most Americans believe that if you are here illegally, that you should be deported. As Sean Hannity said, people have been talking about this for years. Give people money to get back home. Then have those people reapply to come back to America. And yes, get in line with people all over the world that are applying and trying to do this the correct way. But if you've been in America for a long time, if you've been law-abiding, if you've had
asylum seeker,
if you're an asylum seeker, certainly if you've had children that have served in the military, you're at the front of the line. So this has been the established view of many people. Barack Obama, again, was called the deporter in chief, but what he did was he took that view. What's not curious, but what's very unfortunate for this country and politically unfortunate for the administration Republicans is it's taken them this long to express this publicly in the face of some violent tactics over the past 6 to 9 months. And I just want to repeat this because I know Republicans watch this, and I don't think they listen sometimes to what I'm saying. They just go, oh, Joe's a lefty. No, I'm not. I'm just not. I have been saying from the beginning that the Trump administration, trying to chase the same numbers the Biden administration was able to do in deporting people that were here illegally, was a losing cause because the Biden administration let so many people in the border, some days 5,000, 10,000 people in and right there. So if they're all down by the border, it's much easier for Border Patrol to send them back over, to raise those numbers up. And you're never, ever going to match those numbers by the sort of brutish tactics that we have seen unfold in this country over the last 9 months, and especially in Minneapolis. You're just not going to do that going neighborhood by neighborhood, community by community, street by street, door by door. And the physical, the emotional carnage that comes from that is not going to be politically. You're not going to be able to do that politically. You're going to lose. And that's exactly what's happened here. So the administration has got to figure out a better way moving forward because, yes, Jeff Mason, there's no doubt the overwhelming majority of Americans, what did they say when Donald Trump got elected? We want the southern border secure. And Biden belatedly started moving in that direction to secure the southern border. It took that administration way too long to do it. But Americans want a secure southern border, and they want the worst of the worst out. And as the Wall Street Journal editorial page notes today, the first couple of months, you had 85, 87% of the people being deported being the worst of the worst because they were getting them out of prisons and sending them home. Now that number is down to 5% of those that they're deporting who've committed violent crimes. So now they are deporting a lot of women and children and people who haven't committed violent crimes, who aren't the worst of the worst. So the question moving forward, obviously, is how do they recalibrate? Do they do something more like what Sean Hannity is saying than what their policy has been over the past 9 months?
Well, and clearly the politics are requiring them to recalibrate in some ways based on all of the responses that you just read. Number one, if you've lost Sean Hannity, then you're definitely struggling at the White House under this policy. Number two, I think it's important to note that the tone shift is also a reflection of the fact that the tone is set by the top and set at the top. Stephen Miller is a very, very important policymaker in this White House. President Trump and Vice President Vance, look at the responses that they made to the killing of Renee Good. That was said at the top and then amplified by people like Secretary Noem and, of course, Stephen Miller. The fact that Tom Homan is going in now, he is still a very, very big Trump acolyte. He's got some differences with a few people in the administration, but he is absolutely somebody who is an implementer of President Trump's policies. But the political pressure that is now coming from Republicans, not to mention Democrats, and I would add to that the polling that has shown that the electorate is losing confidence in President Trump's immigration policies. That is having an impact, and that is leading to this shift.
The New York Post has hugged the president closely on this issue throughout, but now breaking with him. A new editorial titled, "What Trump's Next Move Needs to Be in Minneapolis." The Post writes this, quote, "It's time to de-escalate in Minneapolis, Mr. President. These enforcement tactics won't turn the tide and instead are backfiring. Swing voters, Hispanics, and independents who turned to you at the last election see U.S. citizens dying at federal agents' hands and recoil in horror. Team Trump needs to cool things down and let the American public see calm leadership. The hasty and misleading rhetoric coming out of the administration needs to stop. However noble the mission is to rid the country of the worst, the broad support for it is now ebbing fast. Mr. President, the American people did not vote for these scenes, and you can't continue to order them to not believe their lying eyes." Again, Jonathan Lemire, that is the New York Post, which obviously has been right there with Donald Trump, especially on this issue of immigration enforcement. Axios has a quote from an administration official just this morning. I'll paraphrase. It says, "The president knew the situation was effed and knew he needed to un-eff it," thereby putting in Tom Homan, who, let's be clear, is not some open border squish. It's still a tough policy, but at least perhaps the leadership from the top with Bovino and maybe even Kristi Noem now sidelined. The way that ICE operates in Minneapolis and other cities may change a bit here.
Yeah, we're in a strange place when a number of Democrats yesterday thought that Tom Homan would sort of be a de-escalatory force, and I think we should be careful as to what happened in terms of our judgment there. But certainly, it's been as well documented. He was more reasonable after the Renee Good killing than the like. You're right. The New York Post differs with Trump on support for Ukraine, but that's about it. They've gone so far to say, their front page say, iced Barbie. In terms of Kristi Noem being sidelined and her penchant for cosplay for what whatever job she's on right now. We'll see, though, what happens next. I'm told this next week or so will be crucial to the fate of Minnesota. They are pulling some agents out. That's a significant step. But Homan's going there. What will he recommend? Will he actually work with local leaders? You know, President Trump did praise the mayor of Minneapolis, and particularly the governor, yesterday in Truth Social. That also a step, perhaps, toward extending an olive branch. Although, let's remember, both of those men are currently under DOJ investigation for allegedly obstructing ICE operations there. There's also been talk, well, maybe ICE will pull out of Minnesota because things are too hot, but they'll simply move somewhere else. We know they're escalated operations right now in Maine. They're considered other cities, on the map as well, where they could head next. But Joe and Mika, I think there is a recognition in the last few days, this is a storyline that's gotten away from the White House, that outside of the hardest core Republicans, people don't want to see this. Outside of the hardest core MAGA supporters, people don't want to see these kind of clashes. It just leads to unease and unhappiness, a sense that things are falling apart. We'll see if the president, who's usually good at reading the polls, makes some choices to go in another direction.